Crack! The porcelain box shattered against the marble kitchen floor, fragments spinning across the polished surface like shrapnel. Olivia's scream pierced the afternoon silence, a sound of pure terror that seemed to freeze the very air in the room. She clutched her left arm against her chest, her small body trembling as tears streamed down her hollow cheeks. Sarah loomed over her, beautiful face contorted with fury, one hand still raised with the wooden spoon. For a heartbeat, time stood suspended between them. The cowering 7-year-old and the towering woman, whose eyes reflected something far colder than mere anger. Then they both heard it, heavy footsteps in the foyer, the distinctive sound of an expensive briefcase being set down on the entry table. The deep baritone voice calling out, "Hello, anyone home?" The transformation was immediate and complete. Sarah's face softened, fury melting into concern with practiced efficiency. She dropped to her knees beside Olivia, one manicured hand gently touching the child's shoulder. "Oh, Robert, thank goodness you're home early," she called out, her voice pitched perfectly between worry and relief. "We've had a little accident in the kitchen." Robert Blackwell, 54-year-old CEO of Blackwell Industries, stood in the doorway, his 6'2" frame silhouetted against the afternoon light. His silver-streaked dark hair was disheveled from the red-eye flight that had been delayed 3 hours. Exhaustion lined his face, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from negotiating 8-figure deals and navigating corporate politics while functioning on too little sleep. All he'd wanted was to see his daughters and perhaps enjoy a quiet dinner before collapsing into bed. Instead, he found his youngest daughter crumpled on the floor, surrounded by broken porcelain, cradling her arm while his wife of 18 months knelt beside her with an expression of perfect maternal concern. "Olivia was trying to help me put away the china," Sarah explained, brushing a strand of honey blonde hair from her face. "I told her to wait for me to handle the heavy box, but you know how independent she is." Robert looked at his daughter, truly looked at her for the first time in what might have been weeks. Something cold settled in the pit of his stomach. Olivia had always been small for her age, delicate like her mother had been before cancer took her 3 years ago. But this was different. Her cheeks were hollow beneath her pale skin. Her collarbones protruded sharply under her thin t-shirt. Her eyes seemed too large in her small face, rimmed with shadows that no 7-year-old should have. When had she gotten so thin? He had seen her just last week before his trip to Tokyo, hadn't he? Had he actually looked at her then? Or had he merely been in the same room, his attention divided between conference calls and email notifications? "Olivia, sweetheart, let me see your arm," he said, moving forward and kneeling down. The child flinched away from him, actually flinched, as though she expected him to hurt her. That cold feeling in his stomach spread through his entire body. "It's okay, Daddy's here," he heard himself saying words that shouldn't need to be said. "Daddy won't hurt you." Sarah was standing now, touching his shoulder with her perfectly manicured hand. "She's just frightened from the fall, Robert. Let me take her to urgent care. You must be exhausted from your flight. You should rest." But he was already lifting Olivia carefully, so carefully because she weighed almost nothing. A child of 7 should not weigh nothing. She whimpered against his chest. "My arm hurts, Daddy. It hurts so much." "I know, baby, I know. We're going to fix it. I promise." He carried her to his car, Sarah following with protestations about how she should be the one to take Olivia, how he needed to rest, how she knew which clinic to go to. But something in him had shifted. Some protective instinct finally awakening after 18 months of sleep. He buckled Olivia into the backseat of his Mercedes S-Class, his movements gentle but efficient. Sarah stood in the driveway, arms folded across her chest, her expression unreadable. "I'll call you when we know something," he said, his voice calm despite the storm brewing inside him. As he backed out of the driveway, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Olivia sat small and hunched in the vast leather seat, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit he had never seen before. Something shabby and stained that looked like it had been rescued from a donation bin. Where had it come from? He'd bought her a collection of designer stuffed animals just last Christmas. Pristine, expensive toys that she'd smiled politely at but never seemed to play with. Sarah remained in the driveway, a slender figure in expensive casual wear, watching them leave. Just before he turned the corner, he caught a glimpse of her face in the side mirror. The mask of concern had slipped, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. He drove straight to Memorial General, the best hospital in the city, where he sat on the board of directors, where Dr. Elena Ramirez, the top pediatric orthopedist in the state, would see his daughter in the emergency room under the fluorescent lights that made everything too bright and too real. The nurse who took Olivia's vitals, Nurse Chen according to her name tag, had a kind face that did something complicated when she checked Olivia's weight and blood pressure. "Mr. Blackwell, when did Olivia last eat?" she asked, her tone professional, but her eyes concerned. "She had lunch, didn't you, sweetheart?" Sarah's smooth voice seemed to fill the small examination room, though she wasn't there. Her presence lingered like a shadow. Olivia's eyes were fixed on the floor, her good hand clutching the rabbit. She said nothing. "Olivia?" Nurse Chen prompted gently. "When did you eat today?" Silence. The child's lips pressed together, and Robert saw something flash across her face that looked like pure terror. "It's okay," he said, forcing his voice to stay calm, soft. "Olivia, you can tell us. No one will be angry." "Yesterday," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Yesterday morning, when you called on video. Remember? You saw me eating pancakes?" The video call, yes. He remembered Olivia at the breakfast table with a plate of pancakes, smiling and waving, telling him she loved him. He had been in a hotel in Tokyo, feeling guilty about missing another week at home, but reassured that his daughters were being cared for, that Sarah was the perfect stepmother, attentive and loving. "And after that?" Nurse Chen asked, her pen poised over the chart. "She took the food away when you hung up," Olivia said, her voice small but suddenly clear. "She said I was getting fat, that I needed to learn discipline, that my mama had been weak and that's why she died, and I wasn't going to grow up weak like her." The words hit Robert like physical blows, each one landing with the weight of truth he had been too blind to see. "What else, Olivia? What else has Sarah done?" The question came out harsher than he intended, desperation sharpening his tone. "I can't tell you, Daddy." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "I can't. She said if I told you, she would send Sophie away. She would put her in an orphanage, and I would never see my sister again." The tears spilled over now. "She said you would believe her because you always believe her. She's pretty, and she's good at making you happy. And I'm just a kid, and nobody listens to kids. Nobody believes kids." She was sobbing now, and he gathered her into his arms, careful of her injured arm, and felt his heart shattering into pieces that he didn't know if he could ever put back together. "Where is Sophie now?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "In the nursery. Mrs. Gonzalez is watching her. Sarah doesn't like Mrs. Gonzalez, but she needed someone to watch Sophie while she made me clean out the storage room." Another sob shook her small frame. "The boxes were so heavy, Daddy. I tried to tell her I couldn't lift them, but she said I was lazy, that I needed to work harder, that you paid for my food and my clothes, and I needed to earn my keep." Mrs. Gonzalez was the housekeeper he had hired when Olivia was born, who had helped his first wife through those early, exhausting months, who had been with him through Catherine's illness and death. He had kept her on to help with Sophie, his second daughter, the baby who was now 18 months old. But Sarah had been gradually reducing her hours, saying she wanted to be more hands-on with the children, that it was important for her to bond with them as their new mother. He had thought it was sweet, thought it showed how much Sarah cared. He had been such a fool. De Ramirez entered then, a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses and steady hands. She examined Olivia's arm with gentle efficiency, asking simple questions that seemed to put the child at ease. After sending Olivia for x-rays, she asked to speak with Robert privately. They stepped into the hallway, leaving Olivia with Nurse Chen, who was showing her a book of animal pictures. "Mer Blackwell," Dr. Ramirez began, her voice low and professional. "Your daughter's arm is fractured, a clean break of the radius. It will need a cast for 6 to 8 weeks." Robert nodded, processing this information. "However, there are other concerns I need to discuss with you." She looked directly into his eyes. "Olivia is severely malnourished. Her weight is in the 5th percentile for her age, down from the 65th percentile at her last checkup 8 months ago." The hallway seemed to tilt slightly, and Robert put his hand against the wall to steady himself. She has bruises on her back and legs in various stages of healing, Dr. Ramirez continued, her voice gentle but firm. The pattern is consistent with being struck with an object, possibly the wooden spoon Olivia mentioned. I didn't know, Robert heard himself saying, the words pathetic and inadequate. I've been traveling. I trusted. I thought she was being cared for. I'm not accusing you, Mr. Blackwell, Ramirez said, her gaze softening slightly. But I am telling you that your daughter has been systematically abused, and we need to ensure her safety and the safety of any other children in the home. Sophie. The thought of his baby daughter, not yet 2 years old, helpless and vulnerable in that house with Sarah, made his blood run cold. I need to go home, he said, his voice tight with urgency. I need to check on Sophie. I've already called Child Protective Services, Dr. Ramirez told him. They'll meet you there with a police officer. In the meantime, Olivia will stay here overnight for observation and additional tests. Robert went back into the examination room where Olivia was having her arms set in a purple cast, her favorite color, though the sight of it only made him feel worse. When had he last asked her about her favorite anything? Olivia, sweetheart, I need to go home and check on Sophie, he said, kneeling to her eye level. I'm going to make sure she's safe, and I'm going to make sure you're both safe, and I promise you, I swear to you on your mother's memory that Sarah will never hurt you again. His voice broke on the last words. You believe me? The hope in her voice, the desperate, fragile hope, nearly broke him. I believe you, he said firmly. I'm so sorry I didn't see it before, baby. I'm so sorry I let this happen. But it's over now. I promise you it's over. He kissed her forehead, thin and cool beneath his lips, and left her in the capable hands of the medical staff, his mind racing through every interaction he had witnessed between Sarah and his daughters, seeing them now with new eyes, seeing the way Olivia always fell silent when Sarah entered a room, the way she never asked for seconds at dinner, the way she flinched at sudden movements. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of his life. The house was dark when he arrived, despite the early evening hour. He found Sarah in the living room with a glass of wine, her expression carefully neutral. How is Olivia? She asked, crossing her legs elegantly. Fractured arm. She'll need a cast for 2 months. He kept his voice level, watching her face for any sign of guilt or remorse, but there was nothing, just polite concern. Poor thing. I told her those boxes were too heavy. Where's Sophie? Asleep in her crib. She went down early. She's been fussy all day. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart in his throat, and pushed open the nursery door. His baby daughter lay in her crib, her breathing shallow, her cheeks flushed with fever. When he picked her up, she was burning hot, her body limp in his arms, and the rage that filled him then was unlike anything he had ever felt. A white-hot fury that demanded justice, demanded retribution, demanded that he protect his children no matter the cost. Sophie didn't stir as he wrapped her in a blanket, the soft yellow one that had belonged to Catherine, that Sarah had tried to throw out during her redecorating phase. He cradled his daughter against his chest and turned to find Sarah standing in the doorway, arms crossed. What are you doing? She's sleeping. She's not sleeping, Sarah. She's sick, burning with fever. I'm taking her to the hospital. Don't be ridiculous. She probably just has a cold. Some children's Tylenol and a good night's sleep will fix her right up. Move out of the way. His voice was dangerously quiet. For a moment, they stared at each other, Robert holding his fevered daughter, Sarah blocking the doorway with a coldness in her eyes that he couldn't believe he had never noticed before. You're overreacting, she said, her voice still smooth but with an edge now. This is why men shouldn't handle medical issues. You panic over nothing. Move or I will move you. Something in his tone must have convinced her because she stepped aside, her face now a mask of injured dignity. Fine, take her to the ER and waste everyone's time. They'll just tell you what I already said. He brushed past her without another word, carrying Sophie carefully down the stairs and out to his car. The drive to the hospital was a blur of fear and rage, his mind playing terrible scenarios of what might have been happening in his home while he was away building his empire, making his fortune, expanding his influence. All the things he had thought were important. The emergency room doctors admitted Sophie immediately, started fluids, ran tests that showed severe dehydration and a kidney infection that had been allowed to progress to a dangerous level. If you had waited even 12 more hours to bring her in, the damage could have been permanent, the attending physician told him gravely. She's going to need IV antibiotics for at least 3 days, possibly longer depending on how she responds to treatment. Robert stood beside the hospital crib where his baby daughter lay, so small and vulnerable with an IV in her tiny arm, and he felt his world shifting on its axis. Everything he had believed about his life, about his marriage, about the safety and happiness of his children, had been a carefully constructed illusion. He pulled out his phone and called Michael Chen, his attorney, at midnight. The man answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Robert, what's happened? I need you at Memorial General Hospital as soon as possible. Both my daughters are admitted. Olivia has a broken arm and signs of prolonged abuse and malnutrition. Sophie has a kidney infection and severe dehydration. My wife is responsible, and I need to know what to do next." There was a brief silence, then Michael's voice, fully alert now. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't talk to anyone else about this until I arrive." While waiting, Robert accessed the security camera system he had installed throughout the home after a break-in attempt in the neighborhood last year. Cameras in every common area, cameras in the hallways, cameras covering every entrance. He had never thought to check the footage, had never imagined he would need to. But now, sitting in a chair between his daughter's hospital rooms, he scrolled back through days and weeks of recordings. What he found made him physically ill. Olivia, age 7, thin and fragile, carrying boxes from the storage room, while Sarah supervised with her arms crossed, striking the child across the back with a wooden spoon when she moved too slowly. Olivia washing dishes at the sink, her hands red and raw, while Sarah berated her for breaking a glass, for being clumsy and worthless and a burden. Olivia sat at the kitchen table with an empty plate while Sarah ate dinner, telling the child that she needed to learn gratitude, that food was a privilege, not a right, that her father worked too hard to waste money on ungrateful children who didn't appreciate what they had. And Sophie, his baby, left crying in her crib for hours while Sarah ignored the monitor. Left in soiled diapers until her skin was angry and red. Fed formula that looked too thin, too watered down. Fed less and less as the weeks progressed until the baby stopped crying as much, stopped moving as much, became lethargic and quiet in a way that Sarah must have preferred because it meant less work, less inconvenience, less interruption to her lifestyle. "I'm going to kill her," Robert said quietly, his vision blurring with rage. Michael arrived then, disheveled in jeans and a sweater thrown over his pajama shirt, and gently took the phone from Robert's hands. "No, you're not. You're going to let the justice system handle this. You're going to be the father your daughters need, which means you stay free, you stay present, you stay in control. Understood?" Robert understood. Intellectually, he understood. But the rage was still there, burning in his chest, demanding outlet, demanding that he make Sarah pay for every moment of suffering she had inflicted on his innocent children. He saved the video files, backed them up to 3 separate drives, and sent copies to Michael, to the hospital's child advocacy team, and to the police detective who arrived at 3 a.m. to take a statement. Detective Lisa Morgan was a woman in her 40s who worked the Crimes Against Children unit. She watched the videos on Robert's phone with a stone face that revealed nothing until the end, when she closed the screen and fixed him with a steady gaze. "Mr. Blackwell, I've been doing this job for 15 years, and this is among the worst cases of systematic domestic child abuse I've seen in a home with financial resources. Usually we see this level of cruelty in homes where there's addiction or severe mental illness or generational trauma, not in a mansion in the suburbs where the stepmother drives a Mercedes and wears Cartier jewelry." "What happens now?" Robert asked, his voice hoarse. "Now I arrest Sarah Blackwell on multiple counts of child abuse, child endangerment, and assault. I'll coordinate with the DA's office to determine what other charges might be appropriate. In the meantime, you need to get a restraining order, and you need to prepare yourself for the fact that this is going to get ugly. People like your wife don't go down without a fight." Morning found Robert sitting between 2 hospital beds, watching his daughters sleep. Olivia with her purple cast, Sophie with an IV in her tiny arm. Both of them too thin, too pale, too quiet. Both of them victims of a woman he had brought into their lives, a woman he had trusted with their care, a woman he had chosen to replace their mother without properly vetting, without truly knowing her character, without seeing past the beautiful facade to the monster underneath. Mrs. Gonzalez arrived at 8 a.m., her kind face lined with worry. She sat beside Robert, her hands twisting in her lap. "Mr. Blackwell, I should have said something sooner. I should have told you what I was seeing. But Mrs. Sarah, she threatened me, said she would have me deported if I caused trouble, said I would never work again if I spoke against her. And I am an old woman. I need my job. I need my health insurance." Tears welled in her eyes. "But I should have been braver. I should have protected those babies no matter what it cost me." "Tell me what you saw," Robert said, taking her weathered hand in his. He needed to hear it all, needed to understand the full extent of Sarah's cruelty. "She started small after you married her. Just little comments about Olivia needing discipline, about children today being too soft, too spoiled. Then she cut back my hours, said she wanted to spend more time with the girls herself, bond with them." Mrs. Gonzalez wiped away a tear. "I thought it was nice at first, a stepmother who wanted to be involved. But then I noticed Olivia getting thinner, quieter, more withdrawn. I noticed Sophie not gaining weight the way she should." She took a deep breath. "I tried to say something once. I asked Mrs. Sarah if perhaps Olivia should see a doctor, and she smiled at me with those cold eyes and said that if I questioned her parenting again, she would tell you I was stealing from the household, that she had already planted evidence in my locker to make it look true. She threatened to frame you." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." And I was scared. I'm ashamed to say it, but I was scared. So I kept quiet and just tried to sneak food to Olivia when I could, tried to hold Sophie extra when Mrs. Sarah wasn't watching, tried to give those babies some comfort, even if I couldn't give them safety. Robert squeezed her hand. "You're going to testify and you're going to tell the truth, and I'm going to make sure you're protected. Sarah will never threaten you again." That afternoon, while Olivia napped and Sophie's fever finally began to respond to the antibiotics, Robert received a call from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Blackwell, this is Jason Parker. I was the head accountant at the Briarwood Charitable Foundation where Sarah worked before you got married." Robert straightened in his chair, instantly alert. "Yes?" "I saw the news about her arrest, and I need to tell you something. Something I should have reported years ago, but I was afraid. I was just starting my career, and she had so much power in the organization. But I can't stay quiet anymore. Not when there are children involved." "What do you need to tell me?" "Sarah embezzled money from the foundation, nearly $750,000 over 2 years. She was caught. There was going to be an investigation, possibly criminal charges. But then she met you at that fundraiser, and suddenly she resigned, said she was getting married to someone who could take care of her. The foundation's director decided not to press charges because it would have created bad publicity, and you're a major donor to several charitable organizations. They were afraid of losing your support if there was a scandal. But Mr. Blackwell, I kept copies of the financial records. I kept everything because I knew it was wrong to just let her walk away. And if it would help your case, if it would help protect those kids, I'll testify. I'll give you everything I have." The information hit Robert like a thunderbolt. Sarah had married him for money, for security, for a way to escape the consequences of her crimes. And his daughters had been nothing but obstacles to her, inconvenient reminders of his first marriage, living evidence that she would never be his only priority. "Send everything to my attorney," he said, giving Jason Michael's contact information. "Send it tonight. Send it now. And thank you for having the courage to come forward." While his daughters slept, Robert received another visitor, Olivia's first-grade teacher, Ms. Bennett, who had seen the news and come straight to the hospital. "I should have recognized the signs," she said, her eyes red from crying. "Olivia changed so much this past year. She used to be bright, engaged, always raising her hand. Then she became withdrawn, anxious. She would fall asleep at her desk. She flinched when anyone touched her, even just a pat on the shoulder." "Did you report your concerns?" Robert asked, his voice tight. "I spoke to the school counselor. We called Sarah in for a meeting. She was so convincing. Said Olivia was having trouble adjusting to her new family structure. that they were working with a therapist, that it would just take time? Ms. Bennett shook her head. There was no therapist, was there? No, Robert said grimly. That was another lie. The evidence mounted day by day, piece by piece, a damning portrait of systematic abuse. The family pediatrician reviewed the girls' medical records and confirmed that both children had lost significant weight since Sarah entered the picture. He had raised concerns at Olivia's last checkup 6 months ago, but Sarah had assured him it was just a phase, that Olivia was a picky eater, that they were working on it. He had documented his concerns but hadn't followed up, hadn't pushed harder. And now he sat in Michael's office with his head in his hands, saying he should have known, should have seen the signs, should have reported his suspicions. Everyone should have seen, should have known, should have acted. But Sarah had been so good at her performance, so skilled at manipulation, so careful to abuse only when no one was watching, to charm and deflect when anyone questioned, to gaslight and threaten anyone who got too close to the truth. Child Protective Services assigned Jennifer Lopez, a caseworker with tired eyes and a briefcase full of forms, to the case. She interviewed Olivia separately with a trained counselor present, and when she emerged from the room 2 hours later, her expression was carefully professional, but Robert could see the anger underneath, the controlled fury of someone who has seen too much suffering inflicted on innocence. Mr. Blackwell, I'll be straightforward with you, she said. Your daughter has disclosed severe and ongoing abuse, both physical and emotional, as well as neglect that meets the legal definition of child endangerment. We'll be filing a report with the police, and I'm recommending that your wife not have any unsupervised contact with either child pending the outcome of our investigation. She's not staying in my house another night, Robert said, his voice flat and hard. I want her out. I want her away from my daughters. I don't care what it takes. During her search of the home, Jennifer found Olivia's diary, a small notebook hidden under the child's mattress. The pages were filled with a child's handwriting, each entry beginning, "Dear Mama," because Olivia had been writing to her dead mother, pouring out her pain to the only person she thought would believe her, would save her if only she could. Robert read those entries with tears streaming down his face, his heart breaking with every word. Dear Mama, Sarah says I'm fat like you were, and that's why you died, because you were weak and you didn't take care of yourself. But I remember you being beautiful. I remember you holding me. I miss you so much, Mama. It hurts in my chest all the time. Dear Mama, I'm so hungry, but Sarah says dinner is for people who deserve it, and I didn't finish my chores fast enough today. I tried, Mama. I promise I tried, but the vacuum was so heavy, and I couldn't reach all the corners, and she got angry, so angry, and she hit me with the spoon, the wooden one from the kitchen. And my back hurts, but I can't cry where she can hear because then she gets more angry. Dear Mama, Sophie is crying again, and Sarah won't feed her. She says Sophie cries too much and needs to learn. But Mama, she's just a baby. Babies cry when they need things. I remember you told me that when Sophie was born. You said babies communicate through crying, and we have to listen. But Sarah doesn't listen. She just turns up the TV and leaves Sophie in her room. And I sneak up there when I can to hold her and sing to her like you used to sing to me. But I'm scared Sarah will catch me. And then what will happen to Sophie if I can't protect her anymore? The final entry was dated 3 days before Robert came home early, before Olivia broke her arm, before everything fell apart. Dear Mama, I don't think Daddy is ever going to save us. I think he loves Sarah more than he loves us. I think maybe I should stop hoping. But I can't stop hoping, Mama. Because if I stop hoping, then there's nothing left. And I have to stay strong for Sophie. I have to protect her, even if no one protects me. That's what big sisters do, right? That's what you would want me to do. Sarah was arrested that evening at the house, let out in handcuffs while neighbors watched from their windows, and a news crew that had somehow gotten wind of the story filmed from the street. Robert wasn't there. He stayed at the hospital with his daughters, but Michael called him with updates, told him that Sarah had refused to speak without her lawyer present, that she had been denied bail due to flight risk, that her attorney was already spinning a narrative about a misunderstanding, about a father's overreaction, about a stepmother who had been doing her best with difficult children. 4 days after Sarah's arrest, with both girls still in the hospital, Robert's world was upended once more. Olivia disappeared from her hospital room sometime between midnight and 6 a.m., vanishing despite the security guards stationed outside her door. And Robert received a text from an unknown number with a photograph of his daughter, pale and terrified, sitting in a dark room with duct tape over her mouth. Drop the charges or you'll never see her again. I have friends you know nothing about, resources you can't imagine, and I will disappear with this child, and you will spend the rest of your life wondering if she's alive or dead, wondering what she's suffering, wondering if you could have saved her if you had just been reasonable. You have 48 hours, Robert. The clock is ticking. The photograph of Olivia, eyes wide with terror above the silver duct tape, burned itself into Robert's retina like a brand. His hands trembled so violently that the phone nearly slipped from his grasp. 48 hours. The words echoed in his mind, a countdown clock already ticking away the seconds of his daughter's life. Detective Morgan arrived within minutes of his frantic call, her face grim as she examined the photograph. We can trace the phone number, but it's likely a burner. Our tech team will extract any metadata from the image, might give us location information. Robert paced the hospital corridor, a caged animal barely containing his rage. This is Sarah. She's behind this. She's in custody, Detective Morgan reminded him. No bail, no phone calls, except to her lawyer. Then someone's helping her. Someone on the outside. The detective nodded. We'll question her immediately. Meanwhile, I need a list of everyone in her life. Family members, friends, former colleagues. Anyone who might be loyal enough to kidnap a child for her. Robert racked his brain, realizing with sickening clarity how little he truly knew about the woman he had married. She has a brother, David. They weren't close, at least that's what she told me. I met him once at our wedding. Address? I don't know. The admission burned like acid. Sarah handled all the holiday cards, family communications. I was always traveling. His voice trailed off as self-loathing crashed over him. Always traveling, always working, always trusting Sarah to manage his home, his children, his life. Michael arrived, disheveled but alert. He took control with practiced efficiency, directing the hospital to increase security for Sophie, coordinating with police, and keeping the growing media presence at bay. Detective Morgan's phone buzzed. The tech team pulled GPS coordinates from the image. It's coming from an industrial area on the south side, a warehouse district. Relief flooded Robert, quickly replaced by renewed fear. How soon can your team be ready to go in? We're assembling tactical now. They'll need time to assess the location, develop an entry plan. We don't have time, Robert interrupted. The text said 48 hours, but that could be a lie. They could be moving her already. Morgan's expression hardened. Mr. Blackwell, I understand your urgency, but if we rush in unprepared, we risk your daughter's life. Every minute we wait is another minute she's terrified. Another minute they could be hurting her. Robert grabbed his keys. Tell me exactly where the signal came from. Michael stepped forward. Robert, don't do this. Let the professionals handle it. My daughter is out there, Michael. I failed her once. I won't fail her again. Detective Morgan regarded him with professional assessment. Mr. Blackwell, I cannot stop you from driving to that location, but I strongly advise you to wait for our team and stay behind the perimeter once we arrive. She handed him a slip of paper. These are the coordinates. We'll be right behind you. Robert was already moving toward the elevator, the warehouse address burning in his mind. Behind him, he heard Michael arguing with Morgan, her calm response. I'd rather have him where we can see him than lose time chasing him down. 20 minutes later, Robert parked 2 blocks from the warehouse, a dilapidated brick structure surrounded by similar abandoned buildings. The area reeked of urban decay, broken windows, graffiti-covered walls, and chain-link fences crowned with razor wire. No police had arrived yet. No tactical team preparing to rescue his daughter. Just Robert, alone with nothing but the fierce determination of a father who had finally awakened to his responsibilities. He circled the building, noting a single car parked near a side entrance, an ordinary sedan with tinted windows. Moving closer, he peered through a dirt-streaked window and saw nothing but darkness within. A metal door stood ajar on the building's west side. Robert slipped inside, heart hammering against his ribs. The warehouse interior smelled of rust and mildew. Weak sunlight filtered through broken skylights, illuminating dust motes floating in the stale air. He moved silently, years of racquetball keeping him fit despite his executive lifestyle. Every shadow, every creaking floorboard sent adrenaline surging through his system. Then he heard it, a muffled sob. Olivia's voice, unmistakable even in distress. Following the sound, he reached a closed door. Light seeped from beneath it. Robert pressed his ear against the cold metal and heard a man's voice. "Stop crying, no one can hear you anyway." White-hot rage surged through Robert's veins. He tested the door handle, unlocked. Taking a deep breath, he pushed it open. The scene before him seared itself into his memory. Olivia tied to a metal chair, her small body dwarfed by the adult furniture, duct tape across her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Her purple cast stood out starkly against her pale skin. Standing beside her was a man Robert recognized immediately. David, Sarah's brother. In his hand was a pistol, now swinging toward the doorway. "You shouldn't have come alone," David said, his voice flat. "Sarah said you'd bring the police. Said you were too smart to try to be a hero." Olivia's eyes widened above her gag, a fresh wave of tears spilling down her cheeks. "Let her go," Robert said, his voice remarkably steady despite the terror coursing through his veins. "Whatever Sarah promised you, whatever she told you, it's not worth this. It's not worth throwing your life away for." David's laugh was hollow. "She's my sister. She's all the family I have. And you're trying to put her in prison because your kid told some lies." "They're not lies, David. There's video evidence. There's medical records. There's testimony from multiple witnesses." Robert took a careful step forward. "Your sister abused my daughters, and she's going to prison no matter what you do here tonight." "Stay back!" David raised the gun higher. "I'll shoot you. I swear I'll do it." "Then shoot me," Robert said, taking another step. "Shoot me and let my daughter go. She's 7 years old. She's innocent. She's been hurt enough." Another step. Another. Close enough now to see sweat beading on David's forehead, to see his hand trembling slightly. "She said you'd say that. Try to play the hero." David's voice wavered. "She said you'd try to make me doubt her." "And what else did she tell you, David? Did she tell you about the other husbands? Did she tell you what happened to them?" Confusion flickered across David's face. "What are you talking about?" "Your sister has been married before, 3 times before me. 2 of her husbands died in accidents. The third disappeared after emptying his bank accounts." Robert kept his voice level, watching David's eyes. "The police know. They're investigating right now." "You're lying." But uncertainty had crept into David's voice. "Ask yourself why Sarah never introduced you to any of her previous husbands. Ask yourself why she always needed money, even though she kept marrying wealthy men." David's gaze flickered between Robert and Olivia. "She wouldn't. She's my sister. She used you, David, just like she uses everyone. She knew I'd come for Olivia. She knew I'd do anything to save my daughter." What was supposed to happen next? Was I supposed to have an accident too? The gun wavered in David's grip. For a heartbeat, Robert thought he had broken through. That reason would prevail. Then David's face hardened. "Shut up! You don't know her like I do. She's all I have." Robert saw the man's finger tighten on the trigger. With a surge of desperate strength, he lunged forward, grabbing for the weapon. The gun discharged with a deafening crack that echoed through the warehouse. Searing pain tore through Robert's shoulder, but he ignored it, wrestling David to the ground, slamming his head against the concrete floor until the man went limp and the gun skittered away across the floor. Gasping from pain and exertion, Robert staggered to Olivia and ripped the tape from her mouth with shaking hands. "Daddy," she sobbed. "Daddy, you're bleeding." "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you. You're safe now." As he worked to untie her bonds, the warehouse door crashed open. Detective Morgan and a SWAT team poured in, weapons drawn. Behind them came paramedics. And somehow Michael was there too, pushing past officers to reach Robert's side. "You stupid, brave bastard," Michael muttered, helping Robert lower Olivia from the chair. The cavalry was 5 minutes away. "Couldn't wait," Robert gasped, the pain in his shoulder spreading, warmth soaking through his shirt. needed to get to her. His vision darkened at the edges as he watched Mrs. Gonzalez take Olivia into her arms, the child sobbing but safe. Safe. That was all that mattered. All that had ever mattered. Robert woke in a hospital bed, his shoulder bandaged, his arm in a sling. Michael sat beside him, looking rumpled but relieved. Before you ask, Olivia is fine, terrified but physically unharmed. Sophie's fever has broken, and she's responding well to the antibiotics. Mrs. Gonzalez hasn't left either of their sides. Relief washed through Robert like a wave. And David? In custody, singing like a canary. Sarah called him from jail. Apparently she has a guard on her payroll. She convinced him you were abusing the girls and framing her. Promised him $50,000 from an offshore account if he'd rescue Olivia and pressure you to drop the charges. Did he know she planned to kill them? Kill me? Michael's expression darkened. He claims he didn't, but the evidence suggests otherwise. Police found a detailed plan in his car. Once you arrived at the warehouse, you were supposed to have an unfortunate accident. After that, both girls would disappear. Sarah would be released for lack of evidence, and as your grieving widow, she'd inherit everything. Nausea rolled through Robert's stomach. How did I not see what she was? How could I have been so blind? She's a practiced predator, Robert. The police are reopening investigations into her previous husband's deaths. They've frozen all her accounts, including 3 offshore ones you didn't know about. They found evidence she's been planning this for years, researching wealthy widowers with children, targeting you specifically after Catherine died. A knock at the door interrupted them. Detective Morgan entered, looking tired but satisfied. Mr. Blackwell, glad to see you awake. The bullet went clean through your shoulder. No major damage. You were lucky. Not luck, Robert said quietly. I couldn't let her win. Couldn't let her hurt my children anymore. Morgan nodded, understanding in her eyes. David Pierce has given us everything. Sarah's plans, her offshore accounts, details about her previous marriages. She had it all worked out. Marry you, wait a suitable period, then eliminate you and the children. As sole heir, she would have inherited nearly everything. What happens now? Sarah's preliminary hearing is in 3 days. With the evidence we have, plus David's testimony and the kidnapping charge, there's no chance of bail. The DA is pushing for maximum charges, multiple counts of child abuse, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, fraud. She smiled grimly. Your ex-wife won't see the outside of a prison for decades, if ever. 3 days later, Robert was discharged from the hospital. His first stop was Olivia's room, where his daughter sat surrounded by stuffed animals sent by well-wishers. Her face lit up when she saw him, though anxiety still shadowed her eyes. Daddy, your arm's in a sling like mine. The attempt at brightness couldn't quite mask her fear. Robert sat carefully on the edge of her bed. We match, battle wounds from fighting monsters. Her smile faltered. Is Sarah going to come back? No, sweetheart, never. She's in jail and she's going to stay there for a very long time. Olivia's lower lip trembled. She said you wouldn't believe me. She said nobody would believe me because I'm just a kid. Robert gathered her into his arms, mindful of both their injuries. I believe you, Olivia. I will always believe you, and I will never, ever let anyone hurt you again. They sat like that for a long time, father and daughter clinging to each other, healing beginning in the spaces between heartbeats. Later, Robert visited Sophie in the pediatric ICU. His younger daughter was still too small, too fragile in her hospital crib, but her color had improved, and she reached for him when she saw him. Da! The simple syllable brought tears to his eyes. The pediatrician reported that Sophie was recovering well but would need follow-up care to monitor her kidney function. Children are remarkably resilient, she assured him. With proper nutrition and care, both your daughters should make a full physical recovery. The unspoken implication hung in the air. Physical recovery was only part of the battle. The psychological wounds would take longer to heal. Robert began making calls from the hospital, rearranging his entire life. He contacted his COO, transferring day-to-day operations of Blackwell Industries. Family emergency, he explained, indefinite leave of absence. Richard, his second in command for a decade, didn't hesitate. Take all the time you need, Robert. We've got this covered. Next came housing arrangements. Robert couldn't bear the thought of taking his daughters back to the mansion where they had suffered so much. He called his realtor and instructed her to find a new home, something smaller, warmer, in a neighborhood with good schools and parks nearby. Nothing ostentatious, he specified, something that feels like a home, not a showcase. While his daughters continued their hospital recovery, Robert dove into research. Child psychologists specializing in trauma, support groups for abused children, parenting classes for single fathers. He interviewed therapists, consulted with child welfare experts, and absorbed everything they told him with the same focused intensity he'd once reserved for corporate acquisitions. A week after the rescue, Jennifer Lopez from CPS visited him with an update. "I've reviewed your arrangements, Mr. Blackwell, and I'm impressed. The new home, the therapy plans, the reduced work schedule. You've covered all the bases." "I let them down once," Robert said quietly. "Never again." "There is one more thing," she added. "During our investigation, we found evidence that Sarah had been systematically isolating your children from extended family. Did you know your late wife's parents have been trying to contact you for almost a year?" Robert stared at her in shock. "Catherine's parents? That's impossible. They cut off contact after the funeral, refused to return my calls." Jennifer shook her head. "According to our interviews, they've been sending letters, emails, even called your office multiple times. They never received any responses." Cold realization washed over him. Sarah intercepted everything. "It appears so. They didn't even know about your remarriage until they saw the news about Sarah's arrest." She handed him a business card. "They're staying at the Marriott downtown. They'd very much like to see their granddaughters." That evening, Robert met James and Eleanor Miller in their hotel lobby. Catherine's parents looked older than he remembered, grief having carved deep lines in their faces. The meeting was awkward at first, weighted with unspoken recriminations and misunderstandings. "We thought you wanted a clean break after Catherine died," James said, his voice rough with emotion. "When you stopped answering our calls, stopped bringing the girls for visits. I thought you blamed me for not getting Catherine to the specialist sooner," Robert admitted, "for being too focused on work during her illness." Eleanor reached across the table and took his hand. "We were all doing our best during an impossible time. What matters now is those girls need their family. All of their family." They showed him the emails they'd supposedly received from his account. Cold messages asking them to respect his need for space, to allow him to move on without reminders of Catherine. Messages he had never written, sent from an account Sarah had clearly accessed. "She was isolating us," Robert said, anger burning anew, cutting off anyone who might notice what she was doing to the children. The next day, he brought Catherine's parents to the hospital. Olivia's shriek of joy upon seeing her grandparents lifted a weight from Robert's chest he hadn't realized he was carrying. Sophie was too young to remember them, but she warmed quickly to Eleanor's gentle voice and James's silly faces. Watching his daughters with their grandparents, Robert felt Catherine's presence more strongly than he had in years. Not as a ghost of grief and regret, but as a reminder of the family they had built together, the love that remained even after she was gone. The preliminary hearing arrived with media camped outside the courthouse. Sarah appeared in an orange jumpsuit, her hair still somehow perfect, her face composed in an expression of wounded dignity. She didn't look at Robert, seated behind the prosecutor's immobile, but her eyes lingered on the empty chairs beside him, where the children would have been if he had brought them. Amanda Chen, a veteran prosecutor from the DA's Crimes Against Children unit, had built a comprehensive case. Sarah's attorney, Rebecca Goldman, attempted to paint her client as a misunderstood stepmother trying to discipline difficult children, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge bound Sarah over for trial on 12 counts of child abuse, 4 counts of child endangerment, 2 counts of assault with intent to cause great bodily harm, 1 count of kidnapping conspiracy, and 1 count of attempted murder related to Sophie's untreated infection. David Pierce took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against his sister in exchange for a reduced sentence of 15 years. On the witness stand, he described Sarah's calculated manipulation, how she had convinced him the children were in danger from Robert. "She said the older kid was expendable," David testified, his voice breaking. She said if we had to get rid of her to save Sarah's freedom, it would be worth it. Said the girl was damaged anyway, would probably grow up messed up, and it would be a mercy, really. He looked directly at Robert. That's when I knew what my sister really was. And I still helped her anyway, because she's family. I was wrong. God, I was so wrong. As Sarah was led away in handcuffs, she finally looked at Robert. For just a moment, the mask slipped, revealing such cold hatred that several observers gasped audibly. Then it was back in place, the perfect, wronged wife, head held high as she returned to her cell. Outside the courthouse, Robert faced a wall of cameras and microphones. Michael tried to usher him past, but Robert paused. I have a brief statement, he said, his voice steady. To any parent watching, trust your children. Listen to them. Believe them when they tell you something is wrong. I almost lost my daughters because I was too busy, too distracted, too willing to believe a comfortable lie rather than see an uncomfortable truth. Don't make my mistake. With that, he walked away, ignoring the shouted questions that followed him to the car. That evening, sitting between his daughter's hospital beds, Robert made a decision. He called Michael. I want to establish a foundation, he said without preamble, for abused children, especially those in affluent homes where the abuse often goes unnoticed. Funding for specialized training for teachers, pediatricians, social workers, anyone who might spot the signs I missed. We can do that, Michael replied. What do you want to call it? Robert looked at Olivia, sleeping peacefully for perhaps the first time in 18 months, the worn stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. The Catherine Blackwell Foundation for Children, he said softly, in memory of my first wife, who would have protected them better than I did. As spring turned to summer, the Blackwell family began to heal. Robert moved his daughters into the new house, a comfortable 4-bedroom in a neighborhood filled with young families. Mrs. Gonzalez had her own suite on the first floor, no longer as an employee but as family, the grandmother figure the girls needed in their lives. Robert assumed the role of chairman at Blackwell Industries, attending board meetings remotely and delegating day-to-day operations. His new office was a converted sunroom overlooking the backyard, where he could watch his daughters play while he worked. Olivia started therapy 3 times a week, slowly processing the trauma of Sarah's abuse. Some days were better than others. She still hoarded food in her room, still flinched at sudden movements, still had nightmares that left her screaming in the dark. But there were improvements. Small smiles, moments of spontaneous laughter, days when she seemed like any other 7-year-old. Sophie, too young to understand what had happened, but old enough to have been marked by it, clung to Robert and Mrs. Gonzalez, reluctant to let either out of her sight. She gained weight, started hitting developmental milestones again, but remained more solemn than a toddler should be. The Millers visited every weekend, gradually rebuilding their relationship with Robert and strengthening their bonds with their granddaughters. Eleanor taught Olivia to bake, just as she had taught Catherine. James took Sophie for walks in the park, pointing out birds and squirrels with the same patience he had once shown his own daughter. Robert watched these interactions with a bittersweet ache. Catherine should be here, should be part of this healing. But in her absence, he was determined to be the father his children deserved, present, attentive, and fiercely protective. Sarah's trial began in late summer, a media spectacle that Robert shielded his daughters from as much as possible. The evidence was damning: security footage, medical records, financial documentation showing the elaborate scheme she had constructed. Multiple witnesses testified to her calculated cruelty and her careful manipulation of those around her. David Pierce testified against his sister, describing in detail how she had planned to eliminate Robert and the children, how she had coached him on what to do if Robert came to the warehouse alone. Sarah watched her brother's testimony with the same emotionless expression she maintained throughout the trial, never once showing remorse or concern. Robert took the stand as well, acknowledging his own failures while detailing the abuse his children had suffered. Rebecca Goldman's cross-examination was brutal, attempting to paint him as an absent father who had neglected his children long before Sarah entered the picture. Isn't it true, Mr. Blackwell, that you were so eager to replace your dead wife that you married the first attractive woman who showed interest without doing any real investigation into her background or character? That's true, he admitted, feeling the shame of it burning in his chest. I was grieving. I was overwhelmed with single parenthood. And Sarah seemed like an answer to my problems, someone who could step into the role my wife had left empty. I didn't investigate her background thoroughly. I didn't check her references carefully. I didn't protect my children the way I should have, and they suffered because of my poor judgment. And isn't it also true that you're only pursuing these charges now because you want to avoid paying alimony in a divorce? That this is really about money and control rather than genuine concern for your children? No, he said, his voice hardening. I'm pursuing these charges because my daughter weighed 42 pounds when she should have weighed 60, because she had bruises covering her back from being beaten with a wooden spoon, because she kept a diary documenting systematic abuse that nearly killed her spirit. I'm pursuing these charges because my infant daughter almost died from an infection that went untreated while Sarah ignored her cries. His voice rose with controlled anger. I'm pursuing these charges because I have video evidence of crimes being committed, because I have testimony from multiple witnesses, because the evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. This isn't about money. It's about justice. It's about ensuring Sarah can never hurt another child again. The trial's most difficult day came when Amanda Chen called for Olivia's diary to be entered into evidence. The prosecutor read selected passages aloud, the heartbreaking words of a child crying out to her dead mother for help that never came. Several jurors were openly weeping by the time she finished. Robert watched Sarah throughout the reading, saw something flicker across her face. Not remorse, but something that looked almost like satisfaction. A momentary glimpse of the monster beneath the mask before her expression returned to neutral concern. Mrs. Gonzalez testified about the changes she had observed in the children, the threats Sarah had made to keep her silent. Jason Parker detailed the embezzlement scheme in Sarah's hasty marriage to Robert when discovery seemed imminent. Doctors testified about the children's physical condition, teachers about Olivia's declining academic performance and emotional state. The most powerful testimony came from Olivia herself. After extensive discussions with her therapist, Robert had reluctantly agreed to let her testify via closed-circuit television, sparing her the trauma of seeing Sarah in person. Watching his daughter on the courtroom monitor, so small in the oversized chair, but speaking clearly about the abuse she had endured, Robert felt equal measures of pride and heartbreak. Her bravery in facing her abuser, even remotely, humbled him. She said, "I was fat like my mama, and that's why mama died," Olivia said, her voice small but steady. "She hit me with the wooden spoon when I was too slow doing chores. She made me carry heavy boxes until my arms hurt. And when one broke, she told Daddy it was an accident, and I was scared he wouldn't believe me." "Are you still scared, Olivia?" Amanda Chen asked gently. Olivia's eyes found the camera, as if looking directly at her father through the screen. "Not anymore, because my daddy did save me. He did believe me, and Sarah is going to jail now, and she can't hurt me ever again." Rebecca Goldman wisely declined to cross-examine the child, perhaps recognizing that challenging a 7-year-old victim would only alienate the jury further. The defense rested without calling Sarah to testify, relying instead on character witnesses and expert testimony suggesting that the children's injuries could have alternative explanations. The jury deliberated for just 3 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts. Sarah's face remained expressionless as the verdicts were read, but her hands, clasped tightly before her, turned white-knuckled with suppressed rage. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later and denied Rebecca's motion for bail pending appeal, citing Sarah's demonstrated flight risk and the offshore accounts still being uncovered by investigators. Outside the courthouse, Robert faced the media again, this time with Michael and Amanda flanking him. "Justice has been served today," he said simply. "But this case represents a systemic failure to protect vulnerable children. Medical professionals, educators, and even family members saw warning signs but failed to act decisively, including me." He paused, collecting himself. "My daughters paid the price for that collective failure. I'm establishing the Catherine Blackwell Foundation to ensure other children don't suffer the same fate. Thank you." As cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, Robert turned away. The public part of this ordeal was over. Now came the harder, more private work of healing his family. At the sentencing hearing, the courtroom hummed with tense anticipation. Robert sat in the front row, his posture rigid despite the lingering pain in his shoulder. 2 weeks had passed since the verdict, 14 days during which he had focused entirely on his daughter's healing while trying to ignore the media circus surrounding the case. Judge Margaret Thompson entered the courtroom, her black robes flowing behind her as she ascended to the bench. At 64, she had presided over family court for 23 years before moving to criminal court, where she had earned a reputation for fairness tempered with unflinching severity toward those who harm children. Sarah was led in wearing prison orange, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Even without makeup, even in institutional clothing, she maintained a composed dignity that made Robert's skin crawl. She took her seat beside Rebecca Goldman without glancing in his direction, her posture perfect, her expression a careful mask of serene acceptance. Judge Thompson reviewed the pre-sentencing report, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. The courtroom remained silent, save for the occasional rustle of paper and the soft click of journalists' keyboards. Finally, she looked up. "Mrs. Blackwell, please stand." Sarah rose gracefully, hands folded before her. "In my entire career on the bench," Judge Thompson began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed courtroom, "I have rarely seen abuse as calculated, as systematic, and as cruel as what you inflicted on two helpless children." The judge removed her glasses, fixing Sarah with a penetrating stare. "You targeted a grieving family. You married for money and access, and you treated innocent children as obstacles to be punished rather than human beings deserving of love and care." She tapped a folder on her desk. "The evidence shows you enjoyed their suffering, that you derived satisfaction from exerting power over the powerless, and that you were willing to kill to avoid accountability." Sarah's face remained impassive, though Robert thought he detected a slight tightening around her eyes. "I hereby sentence you to 25 years in state prison for the abuse and endangerment charges, to be served consecutively with 15 years for the kidnapping conspiracy and 10 years for the attempted murder, for a total of 50 years without possibility of parole." A soft gasp rippled through the gallery. Even the prosecutors looked stunned by the severity of the sentence. "You will be remanded immediately into custody," Judge Thompson continued, "and I hope you spend every day of your sentence reflecting on the lives you damaged and the childhood you stole." As Sarah was led away by bailiffs, she finally turned toward Robert. For just a moment, their eyes met across the courtroom. There was no remorse in her gaze, no recognition of wrongdoing, only cold hatred in something that looked disturbingly like amusement, as if they were playing a game she still somehow believed she might win. Then she was gone, the heavy doors closing behind her, and Robert felt something release in his chest. Some tight knot of fear and rage that had been coiled there for months, finally loosening, finally allowing him to breathe. Outside the courthouse, Michael navigated him through the press gauntlet to a waiting car. "It's over," his attorney said quietly as they pulled away from the curb. "She's gone." Robert stared out the window at the city pitching by, buildings blurring through the beginnings of tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed until now. "It will never be over for Olivia and Sophie," he said. "They'll carry this with them and forever." "Yes," Michael agreed, "but they'll carry something else too. They'll know their father fought for them, believed them, protected them when it mattered most." The car turned onto the tree-lined street of Robert's new home, a comfortable Tudor-style house with a wide front yard where a tire swing hung from an ancient oak tree. It wasn't a mansion, it had no marble floors or crystal chandeliers, but it had warmth and character and room for a family to heal. Inside, Mrs. Gonzalez greeted him with a gentle hug. "The girls are napping," she whispered. "They've been asking about you all morning." "How did they seem?" Robert asked, hanging his suit jacket in the hall closet. "Olivia is quiet. She understands more than we give her credit for. Sophie just knows her daddy is sad, and it makes her sad too." Robert nodded, loosening his tie. "I need to call Catherine's parents. Let them know the outcome." "Already done," Mrs. Gonzalez said with a small smile. "They're bringing dinner over later. Eleanor is making her lasagna, Olivia's favorite." This was his life now, Robert reflected, as he climbed the stairs to check on his sleeping daughters. Days measured not in corporate acquisitions or stock fluctuations, but in small victories. Olivia eating a full meal, Sophie sleeping through the night, moments of laughter that grew gradually more frequent. He paused in Olivia's doorway, watching his daughter sleep. Her face was peaceful in repose. One arm curled around the ragged stuffed rabbit she refused to part with. She'd gained weight in the months since Sarah's arrest, her hollow cheeks filling out, though she remained smaller than other children her age. The purple cast had been removed, her arm healed, though sometimes still bothering her in cold weather. Down the hall, Sophie lay sprawled in her toddler bed, having recently graduated from the crib she'd outgrown. Her thumb was in her mouth, a habit Robert hadn't tried to break, despite the pediatrician's gentle suggestions. After everything she had been through, he couldn't bring himself to deny her this small comfort. The road ahead would be long. The child psychologist had warned him about potential developmental delays, attachment issues, trust problems that might manifest in different ways as the girls grew. But for now, they were safe. They were loved. They were home. The first year after Sarah's sentencing was the hardest. Olivia's nightmares were frequent, violent affairs that left her screaming in the dark, convinced that Sarah was coming back to hurt her, to take Sophie away to punish her for telling the truth. Robert would rush to her room, gathering his trembling daughter in his arms, whispering reassurances until her breathing steadied. "She can't hurt you anymore," he would say, night after night. "She's in prison. She'll never get out. You're safe." "But what if she does?" Olivia would ask, her voice small. "What if she finds us?" "Then I'll protect you," Robert would promise. "Just like I did before, always." Sophie's trauma manifested differently. Too young to articulate her fears, she became clingy, anxious when Robert was out of sight, prone to meltdowns if Mrs. Gonzalez or the Millers tried to babysit. She developed strange rituals, checking under her bed 3 times before sleep, arranging her stuffed animals in a protective circle around her, insisting that her door remain precisely halfway open. No more, no less. Dr. Meredith Lambert, the child psychologist who worked with both girls, explained these behaviors with gentle clarity. "Children who experience trauma develop coping mechanisms," she told Robert during one of their parent consultations. "Sophie's rituals give her a sense of control in a world that once felt dangerously unpredictable. Olivia's hypervigilance, her constant alertness to potential threats, is her brain's way of trying to keep her safe." "How do we help them?" Robert asked, the weight of his responsibility sometimes overwhelming. "Time, consistency, love without conditions, and professional support," Dr. Lambert said. "You're doing everything right, Robert. These wounds don't heal overnight." By the second year, the sharp edges of trauma began to soften. Olivia started third grade at her new school, where no one knew her history, where she could be just another child rather than the victim from the headlines. She made a friend, Lily Chen, a quiet girl who shared her love of books and puzzles. The first time Olivia asked if Lily could come over to play, Robert had to step into his office to compose himself, overcome by the simple normality of the request. Sophie turned 3, her vocabulary exploding, her personality emerging as stubborn, creative, and surprisingly funny. She still had separation anxiety, still followed Olivia around the house like a shadow, but she no longer dissolved into panic when Robert left for occasional board meetings. Progress came in small increments: a full night's sleep, a genuine laugh, moments when the past seemed to recede and the present shone bright with possibility. The Catherine Blackwell Foundation launched officially on the second anniversary of Sarah's sentencing, funded initially by Robert's personal fortune, but quickly attracting donors who recognized the unique gap it filled, identifying and preventing abuse in wealthy homes, where money and social status often concealed dark secrets. "Abuse doesn't discriminate by income," Robert said at the foundation's first fundraising gala. Standing at a podium he once would have commanded with corporate authority, but now approached with humble purpose. "But wealth can hide it. Privilege can protect the abuser. Our foundation aims to educate those on the front lines, teachers, pediatricians, social workers, to recognize the signs that I missed in my own home." The foundation funded research, created training programs, offered scholarships for abused children's therapy, and established a legal defense fund for those fighting custody battles against wealthy abusers. It became Robert's second calling, a way to transform his family's pain into protection for others. At home, he created new traditions with his daughters: Sunday pancake breakfasts, movie nights with elaborate pillow forts, summer camping trips in the mountains. Each tradition another brick in the foundation of their rebuilt family, another thread in the tapestry of normal childhood that he was determined to weave for them despite the damaged beginning. 5 years passed with the strange elasticity of time, sometimes crawling through difficult days, sometimes racing through weeks of ordinary happiness. 5 years of therapy and patience in slowly rebuilding what Sarah had broken. 5 years of Robert learning to be the father he should have been from the beginning, present and attentive and willing to put his daughters before everything else. Olivia was 12 now, in 7th grade at the local middle school where she maintained a solid B average and played defender on the soccer team. She remained small for her age but healthy, her once gaunt face now animated with expressions that ranged from preteen exasperation to genuine joy. She still saw Dr. Lambert once a week, working through the layers of trauma that sometimes surfaced in unexpected ways. A panic attack when a teacher raised his voice, nightmares before the anniversary of Sarah's arrest, moments of fear that her father might leave again. But there were more good days than bad now. She had friends, real friends who came for sleepovers and birthday parties. She laughed sometimes, genuine, uninhibited laughter that made Robert's heart soar with gratitude that she could still find joy after everything. Sophie was 6, with no conscious memories of Sarah's cruelty, though nightmares sometimes suggested that some part of her remembered, some deep place where trauma lived even when the mind forgot. She was entering 1st grade in the fall, her kindergarten teacher having praised her creativity and empathy while gently noting her separation anxiety and tendency to hoard snacks in her backpack. She was shy with strangers, clingy with family, slow to trust new people. But she adored her sister with fierce devotion, followed Olivia everywhere when allowed, and Robert knew that bond had been forged in suffering, but had become something beautiful, something unbreakable. 2 sisters who had survived together and would face the future together. Robert had stepped back from Blackwell Industries, promoting Richard to CEO and taking a position as chairman that required his presence only for quarterly meetings and major decisions. He coached Olivia's soccer team, attended Sophie's dance recitals, made breakfast every morning, and read bedtime stories every night. And slowly, gradually, he earned back the trust he had lost through his blindness and absence. His daughters called him daddy again without hesitation, ran to him when they were hurt or scared or happy. And that gift, that precious gift of their love and trust restored, was worth more than every dollar he had ever earned. Mrs. Gonzalez remained with them, no longer as an employee but as family. The girls called her abuela, and she treated them as the grandchildren she had never had. Her apartment over the garage gave her independence while keeping her close, and Robert thanked God daily for her steadfast presence in their lives. The Millers had become integral to their family circle as well. After initial awkwardness, the painful conversations about misunderstandings, about opportunities missed, they had found their way back to the loving relationship that Catherine would have wanted. They came for Sunday dinners, kept the girls for weekend sleepovers, and filled the grandparent-shaped void in the children's lives with patience and love. Eleanor taught Olivia to bake, passing down recipes that had been in the family for generations. James took Sophie fishing at the lake near their home, teaching her the same gentle patience he had once taught Catherine. And in quiet moments, they shared memories of Catherine with Robert, keeping her alive in stories, ensuring that her daughters knew the woman who had loved them first. Sarah remained in prison, her appeals exhausted, her letters to the parole board filled with protestations of innocence and claims of rehabilitation, routinely denied. Robert had arranged for an attorney to monitor her case to ensure she served every day of her 50-year sentence, but otherwise he tried not to think about her. She was a ghost they had exorcised, a shadow they had stepped out of into the light. David Pierce served his 15-year sentence at a medium-security facility upstate. Unlike his sister, he showed genuine remorse, participating in prison rehabilitation programs and sending occasional letters to the court-appointed intermediary. Robert never responded, couldn't bring himself to forgive the man who had held a gun to Olivia's head, but he didn't prevent the correspondence. Some distant part of him recognized that David too had been Sarah's victim in a way. manipulated and used just as she had manipulated and used everyone in her path. On a Saturday afternoon in October, 5 years and 3 months after Sarah's sentencing, Robert took his daughters to the park near their house, the one with the good playground and the duck pond. They fed bread to the ducks while Sophie chattered about her upcoming dance recital, and Olivia talked about the science project she was working on for school. The autumn sun was warm on their faces, the leaves brilliant gold and red against the blue sky. Robert watched his daughters, healthy and safe and loved, and felt peace settle over him like a benediction. "Daddy," Olivia said, looking up at him with those two wise eyes that still sometimes broke his heart, "are you happy?" The question caught him off guard, its simplicity masking its depth. He considered it seriously, knowing his daughter deserved nothing less than complete honesty. "Yes, sweetheart," he said finally, pulling both girls close against his sides. "I'm happy. I'm so happy because I have you two, and that's all that matters. That's everything that matters." "We're happy too," Sophie announced, throwing a handful of bread that scattered the ducks in an explosion of quacking and flapping wings. "We're happy because we're together and we're safe and nobody's mean to us anymore." "Nobody will ever be mean to you again," Robert promised, the same promise he had made 1,000 times and would make 1,000 times more. "I'll make sure of it. I'll protect you always. I swear it." They stayed at the park until the sun began to set, until the air grew cool and Sophie started yawning. Then they went home to their house where Mrs. Gonzalez had dinner waiting and the Millers had stopped by with apple pie for dessert. They ate together at the kitchen table, laughing and talking and simply being a family, imperfect and scarred, but healing, always healing, choosing love over darkness every single day. Later that night, after bedtime stories and goodnight kisses, Robert sat on the back porch with James Miller, sharing a bottle of whiskey as they often did on these family evenings. "Catherine would be proud," James said quietly, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, "of you, of the girls, of what you've built from the ashes." Robert nodded, emotion thickening his throat. "I wish she could see them. Olivia looks more like her every day." "She does," James agreed. "Has her spirit too, that quiet strength. Sophie's all you, though, stubborn as a mule and twice as charming." They chuckled, comfortable in the shared grief that had, over time, transformed into a different kind of bond. "I've been meaning to tell you," James said after a moment. "Eleanor and I are thinking of moving closer. The condo down the street from you is for sale, and we're not getting any younger. Might be nice to be within walking distance, see the girls more often." Robert smiled. "They'd love that. So would I. You sure don't want to crowd you? James, you and Eleanor are family. You belong here with us." The older man nodded, blinking away sudden moisture in his eyes. They sat in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Inside, Robert could hear Mrs. Gonzalez humming as she cleaned the kitchen, the soft murmur of Eleanor's voice as she helped Sophie arrange her stuffed animals in some complicated bedroom ritual. From Olivia's room came the faint sound of music, the guitar she had started learning last year, her slender fingers picking out a melody that reminded him achingly of Catherine. This was his life now, not the one he had planned, not the one he had thought he wanted, but the one he had fought for and won at tremendous cost. A life built around love and protection and presence, around making up for past mistakes and ensuring they were never repeated. 10 years passed since Sarah's sentencing, years filled with the ordinary miracles of watching children grow. Olivia blossomed into a thoughtful, compassionate young woman, her early trauma shaping rather than defining her. At 17, she was preparing for college, her academic achievements earning her admission to several prestigious universities. She had chosen Catherine's alma mater, a decision that had brought tears to Eleanor's eyes when Olivia announced it over dinner one evening. "I feel connected to Mom there," she explained simply. "Like I'll be walking the same paths, sitting in the same libraries. Maybe I'll understand her better." As Sophie, now 11, was a study in contradictions, still sometimes haunted by nightmares she couldn't articulate, still occasionally hoarding food when stressed, but also vibrant and outgoing in ways Olivia had never been. She excelled in dance, her natural grace and expressiveness drawing attention from instructors who spoke of scholarships and special programs. But she remained fiercely loyal to her family. reluctant to pursue opportunities that would take her away from the safety of home for too long. Robert, now in his mid-60s, had found a balance he never imagined possible in his driven younger days. The foundation had grown beyond his initial vision, now operating in 15 states with plans for national expansion. He still served as chairman of Blackwell Industries, attending quarterly meetings and major events, but the day-to-day operations remained in Richard's capable hands. Mrs. Gonzalez moved into the main house as she aged, her arthritis making the stairs to her apartment difficult. The girls had insisted, setting up the downstairs guest room with her favorite furnishings, ensuring she knew she would always have a place with them, just as she had made a place for them in the darkest days. The Millers did buy the condo down the street, becoming fixtures in the household's daily rhythm. James taught Olivia to drive in the same patient way he had once taught Catherine. Eleanor hosted Sunday dinners that became legendary in the neighborhood, the house filled with the rich aromas of home cooking and the warm sounds of family gathering. Life wasn't perfect. Olivia still occasionally struggled with trust issues in relationships, still sometimes withdrew into herself when memories surfaced. Sophie still battled anxiety, still sometimes woke in tears from dreams she couldn't remember. Robert still carried the weight of his failure to protect them sooner, still sometimes lay awake at night wondering if he could have seen the signs earlier, prevented some of the damage. But they were whole. They were healing. They were a family bound not just by blood, but by survival, by the shared experience of walking through darkness and finding light on the other side. On the 10th anniversary of Sarah's sentencing, Olivia asked to visit the courthouse where the trial had taken place. Robert was hesitant, concerned about reopening old wounds, but Dr. Lambert supported the idea as a potential form of closure. "I need to see it as me now, not as me then," Olivia explained. "I need to stand there not as a victim, but as someone who survived." So Robert took her, just the two of them, on a quiet Tuesday morning. They stood on the courthouse steps where reporters had once swarmed, where cameras had flashed, where their private pain had become public spectacle. "I was so scared that day," Olivia said softly, looking up at the imposing building. "I thought she'd somehow get away with it, that she'd come back for us." "I was scared too," Robert admitted. "But we won." Olivia's voice strengthened. "We beat her. And now I'm going to college, and Sophie's winning dance competitions, and you're helping other kids through the foundation. We didn't just survive, Dad. We thrived." Robert looked at his daughter, this remarkable young woman who had endured so much and emerged not broken, but strengthened. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We did." They didn't go inside the courthouse. They didn't need to. Instead, they walked to a nearby cafe, ordered coffee, and talked about Olivia's plans for the future, her intended major in psychology, her hope to eventually work with traumatized children, to use her own experience to help others heal. "You know," Robert said as they walked back to the car, "your mother would be so incredibly proud of you. I see her in you every day, her strength, her compassion, her resilience." "I hope so," Olivia said. "I wish I remembered her better." "You carry her with you," Robert told her, "in ways you might not even realize." That evening at Olivia's high school graduation, Robert sat in the audience with Sophie, Mrs. Gonzalez, and the Millers, watching as his daughter crossed the stage to accept her diploma. She had added Catherine's name to her own when she turned 16, becoming Olivia Catherine Blackwell, a connection to the mother she remembered in fragments and photographs, whose strength she had inherited along with her smile. As Olivia accepted her diploma, she glanced toward the family section, her smile radiant. Robert gave her a thumbs up, their private signal developed years ago when she needed reassurance during soccer games. She returned the gesture, confidence and love flowing between them across the crowded auditorium. The small graduation party they hosted afterward in the backyard was a testament to how far they had come. Friends and family gathered under strings of fairy lights, music playing, laughter flowing freely. Sophie showed off her latest dance moves to an appreciative audience of Olivia's classmates. Mrs. Gonzalez presided over the food table, beaming with pride. The Millers moved through the crowd, sharing stories of Olivia's childhood with anyone who would listen. Robert found a moment alone with his older daughter as the celebration continued around them. Olivia stood slightly apart, watching the scene with a contemplative expression. "You okay?" he asked. "Just thinking," she said. About everything, about how far we've come. Your mother would be so proud of you, he told her, meaning Catherine, but knowing Olivia understood. I'm proud of you too, more than I can say. Olivia leaned against his shoulder, a gesture she had never outgrown, despite now standing nearly as tall as he was. Do you remember what you said to me that day at the park years ago when I asked if you were happy? I said I was happy because I had you and Sophie, and that was all that mattered. She nodded. That's when I knew for sure that we were going to be okay. That no matter what happened before, no matter what came next, we were going to be okay because we had each other. Robert put his arm around her shoulders, feeling the weight of the past and the promise of the future in this moment of quiet understanding between them. We always will be. Across the yard, Sophie caught their eye and waved enthusiastically, beckoning them to join the impromptu dance circle forming on the patio. Mrs. Gonzalez clapped in rhythm while James Miller attempted a surprisingly spry two-step with Eleanor. Come on, Olivia said, taking her father's hand. Family dance circle. Participation is mandatory. As they joined the circle, as Sophie squeezed between them with delighted laughter as friends and neighbors and family moved together in celebration, Robert felt the final pieces of his heart's long healing settle into place. This was his legacy, not the corporate empire he had built, not the foundation that bore his first wife's name, but these moments of awe shared with the daughters he had almost lost, the family he had fought to protect, the love that had ultimately prevailed against darkness. In the warm glow of the fairy lights, surrounded by laughter and music, Robert Blackwell knew with absolute certainty that he had found the true measure of success, a family healed, children thriving, a home filled with love. The journey had been harder than he could have imagined, the cost nearly unbearable, but the reward, this moment, this life, was worth every battle fought, every tear shed, every scar earned. They were safe, they were loved, they were home, and in the end, that was everything that mattered.